body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment, then Neverland. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of nonviolent global village forever. Here is the after sound of Amen. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Amoga. Varochana Mahamudra. Mani Padme Jvala Pravartaya.
Please take a moment to straighten your mats and cushions, and then stand facing the altar for the chanting of the three refuges. hands on the palm at heart center, posing our bodies, gazing at the Buddha. And we will take refuge first in Sino-Korean, in keeping with our lineage, and then a second time in English. So even if you do not know the words of the chant, see if you can throw your voice in with the sound so you can have the direct experience. I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha.
And resolve with all beings.
And resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
And realize the great way.
And realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
And resolve with all beings.
And resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings.
I will penetrate the teachings. and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha
I go for refuge to the Sangha,
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many,
And transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return to your places now for another shorter period of meditation. Join me in some stretching. sit comfortably. Can everyone hear me okay? It's okay. Can you hear me, Matthew? Very well.
Get it a little closer.
How's that? Better? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jagwa. I'm one of the Dharma teachers here in Ann Arbor. It's wonderful to see a full house, including some new and old faces. Who's here for the first time? Nice, welcome. Thanks for being here with us. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about one of our teachings called the 6 paramitas, or 6 perfections. Specifically the first one, Dana Paramita, which is about generosity and charity. But as I was thinking about it yesterday and kind of putting together my notes, I had this phrase in my mind that we have in our culture where frequently we'll pay someone a compliment and say, "You have such a gift." And then they'll tell you something really beautiful about yourself. And I'm curious if anyone has had someone tell them something that you have such a gift for and what that is. Yeah.
Tenacity.
Tenacity. Ooh, nice. What else?
My mom told me I had style.
Your mom told you you had style.
I was shoveling at the time.
You were doing what?
Shoveling in the garden.
Oh, shoveling.
I don't know what she meant, but
And a gift for shoveling. Uh-huh.
Someone once told me I had a gift of speech.
A gift of speech.
I had the ability to bring words to life.
Ooh, bringing words to life. Thank you. Anything else?
My band director told me I had a gift for rhythm, that I was a very good player because I could conceive of the beats and the rhythm very well, and complicated beat.
Oh, okay. A gift of rhythm.
Yeah.
And what instrument?
Bassoon.
Bassoon.
Yes.
Anyone else?
creativity.
Creativity. Yeah. Wonderful. So let's keep these in mind because we're going to talk a little bit more in the second part of the talk today about this idea of giving and gifts. But these are all wonderful examples of maybe something that someone saw in you, and sometimes we don't see that in ourselves. And so it's a wonderful thing to do for someone to hold up that mirror. And sometimes we obviously remember even years later what gift someone was essentially helping us to see. So I want to talk about the 6 paramitas, and I'm going to try to situate it in a little bit of a bigger context, particularly since we have many new people. And I don't always do a good job of kind of bringing in the bigger picture of this whole Buddhist practice, this project. What is this all about? And so as I was thinking about how to explain in a little bit of a nutshell how this teaching fits in, I was reminded of a phrase from our founding teacher, Venerable Samusunam, who just died about a year ago. And he would tell people that, you know, when you go to the gas station, you have the full service pump and you have the self-service pump. Well, Buddhism is self-service. It's a self-help practice. And so I think that's an important context to kind of keep in mind as we look at, well, why do we have this teaching of the 6 perfections? So we might ask the question, well, we're going to the self-help pump. Well, what is it that we're getting help with? And so really the core of that maybe yearning or that sense of questioning that perhaps brought you here to kind of see what this place is all about is wanting to understand the same thing that set the Buddha in motion as a young person. And that was, why is there suffering in the world and how do we work with it? And so this recognition on his part that there are many forms of suffering that are inescapable. We will get old, we will get sick, we will be separated from people who we love, and eventually we will pass away. So this sense of impermanence and the suffering attaching around wanting that to be different, wishing that maybe things could be a way that was more palatable to us. And so the term that we have in the scriptures is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. Have you heard that word before? And usually it's translated in English as suffering. But what's actually interesting about this is if you do a little research into this word, there is this image that it evokes in its original language. And that is of a wheel of a cart that has got a slight wobble to it. Have you ever seen a bicycle wheel where the rim gets bent and the spokes are not holding it? It's called out of true when the wheel is a little bit bent. And so the spokes of that wheel have to be brought back into true. That's what it's called. And so I think we've all had the experience in life of experiencing this sense of being out of balance, out of true, and wishing that it was different. Kind of going, well, what is it that might bring things back into some sense of balance? And so the core teaching of our tradition is about kind of helping to enumerate what those practices might look like. So after the Buddha experienced, after many years of practice and seeking and going to so many different teachers and trying different methods to answer this question of what is this suffering about and how do we eliminate it, his realization was that there are sort of four truths, four universal truths. The first one we've already said, there is suffering, it's real, we experience it. And the reason why we suffer is because we want things to be different than how they often are. That's that unsatisfactoriness, sort of inescapable. And in a sense, the feeling of dukkha, I think for me, is about when I'm kind of living out of accord with reality, even in little ways. I'll give just a very silly example. I traveled to New York City last week with my husband, who has a business trip there. And for a few weeks, I had wanted to go to this particular little cafe that I found online. It looked really beautiful and interesting food, and I thought, we'll get to go to this cafe, right? And I had traveled with him a few weeks ago to New York as well, and he was having some health issues, and so it was a very stressful trip, actually. And leading up to the trip this time, I actually thought, you know, Jawa, I don't think you're going to go to that cafe because it's not going to be in accord with reality. And the reality is going to be, your husband's going to be very stressed out. His stomach is probably going to be hurting. And it's going to just add more stress to think we're going to go to some place and have a nice dinner that we have to hurry across town to get to. And so I just said, we'll just not go. You know, that was more in accord with reality. It's not really necessarily what I would have picked. But it was okay, and it was actually better because there was no stress then. And my husband said, oh, you know, thanks for recognizing that maybe we shouldn't do that. Just a really small example. So So we have this first truth of there is suffering, and this second truth of much of our suffering is caused by wanting things to be different. The third truth is you can do something about it. So that is sort of what the Buddha realized through all of his practice. And the thing that you can do about it is to cultivate your moral discipline, your spiritual practice, and the way that you relate skillfully with others to reduce your own suffering, to see more clearly, and to reduce the suffering of other people as well. So that fourth truth is really bound up in what is called the Eightfold Path. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I will say what those 8 things are, just so you have some idea. And remembering again that wheel. So this is often represented, and I don't have my pin on, but you'll see people wearing a little pin of a wheel with 8 spokes. So we think about truing the wheel, coming back into accord with reality. Those 8 spokes each need to be in alignment. And so they're all supporting each other, they're all kind of working together. And if one is slightly off balance, you're going to notice it eventually. So those 8 things are balanced understanding, balanced action, balanced speech, balanced mindfulness, balanced concentration, balanced livelihood, balanced effort, and balanced intention. So this is sort of the spokes of that wheel, this thing that's going to put us on the path, that path of actually being able to work more skillfully with this human experience. So that's kind of the backstory. And then where do these 6 paramitas fit in? And so as Buddhism went out into other countries and other cultures many years after the Buddha's death, there was a new school of thought that started to emerge in India and China that had the sense of an archetypal figure, the bodhisattva. You've probably heard that term. That means an awakening being, a being who has decided to awaken on behalf of saving others, and is going to stick around until the job is done, essentially. And we have one of our bodhisattva figures from our Korean tradition here on the altar, Chuchang Posal. And so there are, some of them have names, but the big picture is essentially that we have this map of how we can help ourselves. And then we have this bodhisattva ideal starting to come out, which is how we can help ourselves through helping others, doing it together. And so this larger school of thought came to be called Mahayana, and our Zen tradition is part of the Mahayana tradition, and that's why you hear us talk about these bodhisattvas. And they really represent kind of the loftiest qualities of humans, things that actual humans can, through great practice and determination and learning and falling down and getting up again, actually achieve. And not in the sense of achieving like they've become a professional bodhisattva, but achieving in the sense of really going beyond the limitations of this smaller self, seeing the big picture of how they are so interconnected with others, other people, other beings, and the world, that is what gives them this great love and compassion to keep working for the right and the good. So these paramitas then are kind of the names for these qualities of the bodhisattva. So we have this direct translation of perfections. Paramita can be translated as perfection. And when I was chatting with Hajusum the other day, she reminded me that another translation, and this is actually in the Chinese character that I was able to find online, that character can also mean the other shore. So going from one place to another, right? These are sort of the other shores of skillful expression of our greatest human qualities. Okay, so what are the 6 paramitas, I should say? The first is dana, or generosity. The second one is shila, or virtue. The third one is kshanti, patience. The fourth is virya, perseverance, great energy. The fifth is dhyana, or practicing our meditation attainment. And the last one is prajna, the cultivation of wisdom. So we hear in the echo of that eightfold path, the things that are going to be the expressions, essentially, of these beautiful qualities. And so that's the little bit of this bodhisattva roadmap, if you will. A couple of other beautiful translations of this word paramita that I found in some research. The Sanskrit can be directly translated as far-reaching attitudes. Far-reaching attitudes. So we have this idea of a bigger mind, a bigger perspective, something that's going to expand what we think we are capable of on behalf of ourselves and others. And it could also be translated as the thought of enlightenment. The thought of enlightenment. Sort of, what is this little fire that you feel that makes you go, let me try something different this time around when I find myself in a difficult situation. That's the thought of enlightenment, a little spark. Let me be a little bit more skillful this time. Not going to the cafe just because I want to and it's going to make my husband's stomach hurt. You know, those kinds of things. So just to summarize then, these paramitas are about the aspirational qualities of a being who wishes to wake up. And I guess I would say the waking up part, another way that we might say that for us lay people out in the world, and the way that really resonates for me is sort of growing up. How can we really grow up? So if that is a way that also resonates for you, that's another way of thinking about it. Really growing up and becoming a wise person. Not staying in the old patterns that maybe we developed to survive in childhood. That's something a little different. These aspirational qualities aren't theoretical. We have to actually try to practice them and learn how we can express them in our own specific way, in an applied way. So all of these lists of things that you've heard me talk about are all pointing you to actually seeing, how does this apply in my life? Not just reading about it, but actually trying to make a practice for yourself. So that's what I'm going to talk about in the second part. I'm trying to make a practice for myself around dana paramita. And then the only other thing I would say in summary about the 6 paramitas is remembering that metaphor of the self-help pump, the self-service pump. This is a self-help practice, and so we benefit, but what you will find quite immediately is the truth of a saying that we have here in our tradition, which is helping ourselves is helping others, and helping others is helping ourselves. So really no separation between those things. And so this is a self-help practice and an other help practice kind of simultaneously. So that's part one. That's the big picture. Hopefully that helps fill in a little bit of the context of where some of these practices and teachings come from. And then part two is I wanted to spend a little time talking about the first paramita, dana, or generosity. There are 5,000 talks that a Buddhist teacher could give about dana. And that is just to say that it is a very important concept in our tradition. And it is also, in some ways, a challenging one in that it is not simple. And so I want to give you just a little taste of the sort of the not simpleness of this idea of dana and giving and charity in Buddhist context. And the most famous one that I could think of, and some of you will know this sutra, is from the Diamond Sutra. So there's a famous exchange in the sutra between Buddha and one of his disciples. And they spend a bit of time talking about this notion of giving and gifts. And so I want to read you just a really brief part from that, because I think it will explain a little better what I mean. So this is the Buddha addressing his student Subhuti. He says, "Moreover, Subhuti, when bodhisattvas give a gift, they should not be attached to a thing. When they give a gift, they should not be attached to anything at all." And then this is the commentary from the translator, Red Pine, who's a contemporary Buddhist scholar. He writes, "Having stepped onto the bodhisattva path without such baggage as a self, a being, a life, or a soul, noble sons and daughters are now advised how to walk that path, which they do by practicing the perfection of charity." So he's referring to dana. "For the compassionate aspiration to save other beings is essentially an act of charity, and charity is the only one of the 6 perfections that by itself results in merit, for it is the only member directed exclusively at liberating others. Thus, it is the first step on the bodhisattva path. It is also the last step. For by liberating others, bodhisattvas liberate themselves. But liberation is only possible if there is no attachment of any kind, including attachment to the gift of liberation." In the practice of charity, Buddhists distinguish 3 kinds of gifts: material, emotional, and spiritual. Material gifts include such things as food, clothes, and medicine. Emotional gifts include comfort and protection. And spiritual gifts include guidance and instruction. In terms of their benefits, material gifts put an end to greed. Emotional gifts put an end to anger. And spiritual gifts put an end to delusion. It was the combination of all 3 in the Buddha's daily life that prompted Subhuti's questions and resulted in these further instructions on the nature of the practice that results in awakening. So, bound up in this idea of giving, I like this phrase, compassionate aspiration. That tells you a little bit more about what is motivating this act of entering into a gift. And at the same time, from the Diamond Sutra, we hear immediately the very important teaching that the Buddha is making here, which is, it's not about the merit that you're accruing. It's not about, oh, you're such a good person for doing this. It's not about, oh, woe is the person who needs the gift. It is very plainly this kind of simple and universal exchange of love, I think, with no pretense. I think that's what he's trying to say. And so I've been kind of turning this over in my life, and what got me thinking about this was some difficulty, because that is, of course, our greatest teacher. I remember several years ago, Haju Sunam had said to me that she was a cheerleader for my difficulties. And so sometimes I remember that when I'm having difficulty. How is this how can I be cheerleading my difficulties? Which really means that's where you're going to notice the places that you're stuck and how to do something about it, how to do something different. So I guess this will be kind kind of Jaguar's three ways of looking at Dana Paramita. And the difficulty that I was having was my husband's job is kind of stressful for him. We both work from home in a small apartment, so we're around each other 24/7, pretty much, which is really lovely. And also, I was noticing as things were becoming stressful for him at work recently, I really did not want to listen to it. I was so familiar with the story, and I'd heard it so often for the 15 years that we've known each other, that I really was finding myself checking out. You know, we would go for walks around the neighborhood, and he would be recounting the details of his day, again, the stress. And I felt kind of like this habit energy arising of, I'm trapped, I have to disassociate, this is too stressful for me, and I'm clearly taking responsibility for things that aren't even my problem. I couldn't even see past that trapped feeling to actually notice what he was saying and really listen and be present. And so I've been kind of devising this three-part little practice for myself. So the first one is when working with Dana, noticing, how can I see fresh? So really, I guess the point 5 before step 1 is you have to notice when you're getting trapped, right? When you're reacting instead of being mindful. And then when you notice that, can I say to myself, let me actually just look at my partner's face. What is my compassionate aspiration to be present with them? Not judging what they're saying, not wishing they were saying something different, not planning what I'm going to say. How can I actually just listen and be present? And so for me, there's a sense of allowing this moment, allowing it to be what it is, not wanting it to be something else. And I mentioned that we were in New York last week, and it was really kind of a wonderful place to practice allowing, noticing, because I found that I could be of two completely different minds in an instant. I would walk out of the hotel and we were in Midtown and there was just an onslaught of people, all hours of the day, right? So I'm walking and either these people are obstacles to me and I'm not even paying attention to them and I'm just trying to get to the coffee shop and, oh, I need to get this done at work and everything is an impediment, right? That's one mind. And then the other mind is, let me actually just look at these people. And it was so poignant being in a big city like that. I really have not lived in big cities much in my life. Every person that I saw, I realized I'm never going to see them again. How many millions of people live in New York City, right? And I'm passing them on the street. And they were all so interesting when I started noticing them. I started making a list on my phone because I saw so many characters that I just thought, I'm never going to see that person again. And I'm just so fascinated by them. There was a woman that we passed one day on the sidewalk who had one of her little shopping cart bags heaped on each side. And she was so stooped, she could barely walk with white hair. And just tiny step after tiny step, she was making her rounds. And I felt kind of like protective of her. And so I was looking at her very closely, like, is she okay? You know, do I need to move people out of her way or something? And I noticed that her fingernails were this perfectly polished pink. And I thought, okay, she has someone who's taking care of her. Someone is helping her at home. And so I felt good. And then I was walking, I was trying to get to this little cafe to get a snack. And every kind of, turn I would make, there was this same older gentleman in front of me who had a limp. And he had kind of this rakish hat off to one side. And it's almost like his whole thing was kind of sloped to one side. And he was not a very fast walker. And so I was kind of, stuck behind him in this little barricade where there was some construction, just kind of walking and just then just let me just notice and appreciate him. How many miles around New York City has he walked to get that limp? You know, I was kind of fascinated by him. So every person like that it stood out to me when I actually paid attention. And so I think that first step of the aspiration of compassion is really allowing that truth of whatever this moment is. So that's the first one, noticing how can I see the situation fresh. The second one is staying in it. So an example of my husband's difficulties with work, just noticing when I want to not deal with it. How can I stay in? Because the staying is the place that's actually pointing to the places that I'm stuck, where I feel in the sense of charity, not charitable, miserly. Why are you telling me this again? I don't have time for this. I'm tired. I have my own problems. You know, all the things that we think when someone close to us has some difficulty and it's not a fresh problem. You know, we've heard it before and we think, why is it still here? You know, we haven't taken good care of it yet. Maybe it's still coming back. So really trying to stay. And then the last one is questioning, what is my responsibility in this moment? What is my interconnection? Maybe it's sometimes, how did I contribute to this situation? Maybe it's, how can I contribute in a positive way? You know, maybe this situation has nothing to do with me, but I could help. And I could say, it's not my problem, and I don't really need to do anything about it. Or I could say, actually, I do take responsibility. I do take responsibility because I can. You know, because it's an expression of my my truer desires for how I live my life. And so I guess an example of this lately that I've been kind of thinking about is my next door neighbor is a real character. He, I think he's almost 80, although you wouldn't know it to look at him. He's extremely energetic. He's always washing his car, and he's got like some weights in the backyard. He does like his weightlifting, and he's got this old boom box that someone gave him, and he loves to sing. He was a performer in the Army in the Vietnam War, like part of the, I can't remember what it's called, but like the sort of performing troupe that would go and like, you know, perform for the troops. He was a singer. And so he'll sit out on the front porch with his boombox and play country music and sing along to it really loud. For the last year or so, his wife has been fairly sick. And we live in a small apartment building that has a shared wall. So we know a lot about each other at this point. And he lives on a fixed income. And so there's been many times lately that he's asked my husband and I for money. And I could tell at first that he felt like he needed to have a really good reason. So he would have kind of a dramatic story. And I think sometimes it was true, and sometimes it was almost an offering to make me feel better. Like if he had a good enough reason, I didn't have to feel bad about the fact that he was asking me for something, you know, because there's so much shame, I think, around asking for help. And after a few times of this, I noticed that I had this voice in my head like, is he taking advantage of you? And I had to really go back to that practice. How to actually notice where that message is coming from. Is it just something that I was taught when I was younger? Don't let people take advantage of you. You know, don't loan money to people. You know, they're not going to be trustworthy. They're not going to give it back to you. Which, you know, that can be true sometimes. But when I actually thought about the deeper question of what is my responsibility? What is the interconnection in this situation? I have this wonderful neighbor who always shovels the walk in this winter, even though we live in an apartment building and people come and shovel the walk. You know, he doesn't have to do it. He likes to do it, and he keeps it so clean. We never asked him to do that, you know, but it's our shared walk, and we benefit from that. And so that's interconnection. And I can't live and share a wall with someone and think that they are worried about getting their medication, you know, that month until their social security check comes. So I thought, well, I don't need to pay attention to that voice in this situation. I can really say, it's not a hardship for me. Let me just do what is the right thing to do. So those are just some examples of kind of a practice that I've been trying to apply for myself. And we have just maybe 5 minutes or so. I'm interested in whether, as you reflect on cultivating this aspiration of compassion, ways that you see that you are giving your gifts, maybe ways that you see that you're withholding your gifts. If anything that stood out to you that you would want to share, or perhaps even an example of an idea, a spark for a practice in your life, something that you would like to try to apply. It could be something very simple and concrete, like that example of just noticing when you start getting annoyed with someone you're talking to and you think, let me just take a deep breath and see if I can see them more clearly today. What do they really need right now? So I guess we can pass the microphone if people have a thought on the gifts that you're working with in your life.
Your story about your neighbor is reminding me of something that I'm trying to work on, which is to notice the voice in my head and to notice the stories that I tell myself and how they influence my behavior, but to separate that voice from what I choose to do and to recognize that there's power beyond that voice and that maybe I am inclined to behave in a way that's a bit more close-fisted. Maybe I'm inclined to behave in a way where I'm a bit more separated from other people. Maybe I feel more safer, more comfortable that way. But that voice can be there and can be acknowledged without having to control my behavior. And that I have a deeper understanding within me of where I want to pull from that is not so related to that voice.
I was once told by my teacher, through your practice, allow your life to reflect the four great elements of earth, air, fire, and water. They give of themselves unconditionally and ask for nothing in return. He said, the more we give to ourselves to others, the more we get to give. And we end up with an inexhaustible treasure of spirituality. And that's true. That I give of myself completely to others, no matter how small or big it may be. He once gave an analogy. He said, the sun gives up its heat, warmth, and light to the flower. And the flower gives up its beautiful, bright colors and its sweet smelling fragrance. And he asks for nothing in return. He said, that's the only way to live as an authentic human being.
I watched a video on YouTube, well, actually two of them. One from I think TED Ed, and the other one is from Art, I think it's called. But the videos are about imagine if you were actually every human being that has ever lived, that you just you had to live every human life. Just throughout all time, every place on earth, and that's whenever you interact with someone else, you just interact with yourself. Yeah, maybe there's some truth to that.
I've been married to the same good woman for 49 years. And we were in a partnership for about 3 years before that. So that's 53 years. 4 years? Yeah, 53. Got math right. You change a lot over time, of course. A lot of the problems stay the same, but I'm finding more and more as I age, and I think my wife is as well, that restraint is just everything. Think twice before saying anything.
I became aware of this week. I drove down from Alpena yesterday on 75 and stopped at a rest stop, and there was a man, very disheveled, standing there with a sign that says homeless veteran, anything, etc. And the skeptical person in me recognized that the cardboard was the same size, has a different location, and the block lettering with the magic marker was the same. So I assumed, oh, it's a scam. And how did this person get here? So 6 o'clock tonight, the van is going to come around and pick him up and go to the next stop and pick them up, and they're not going to get any of this money. The story goes through my mind. My experience in New York City is that that's probably true. But the fact that I was making all those judgments, I gave him money. I have no idea, why am I making all these assumptions? So I was trying to respond to what he was asking for, rather than making decisions about whether he deserved it.
I'm trying to practice having self-grace in terms of being generous to others, because I think one of the things that I've been told is that I have a tendency to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I have a situation right now where my family or my parents have to sell our childhood home that I've lived in for 20 plus years. I've already moved. My own wife and my siblings are definitely having a hard time with it. And so I'm very much a glue guy is one of the talents that I have, I would say. And I'm just trying to be a good brother, a good son, in making sure that through the stressful time that I'm providing them with what they need, but also respecting myself in what it is that I'm trying to do, creating my own family with my wife. So having the grace to say, like, this is my responsibility. These are the things I'm going to handle, but at the same time, I need to take care of myself, and I need to make sure to balance those two things together.
Time for maybe one more if there's anyone.
Your story about your neighbor reminded me of my mother. who would, when I was, for as long as I can remember, would give things away and money away and stuff away. And as a little kid, it made me so angry, and I would get upset at her. And I would watch her get be very generous, but also sometimes get conned and scammed and stolen from. And I remember as a teenager telling her, like, you're so susceptible to getting scammed and conned. And because I'd watch her give money to somebody in a stop car at a rest stop with a story, and she was like, I know, and I don't care, and I'd rather be generous. That can happen 1 out of every 5 times I give something away. I don't care. And I think about how natural, like, greed and selfishness, like, came to me as like a little kid, and how, like, difficult and learned the behavior of, like, giving what you have away is and was, and that gift that she gave me and my brothers of, like, modeling that. So thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing, and really appreciated what you said there at the end about sometimes we have to really learn to do it differently, and it helps to have models. And I think it's a wonderful example of why we have all these lists. How do we remember what we're really aspiring to do? Well, we can go back and we can look and see, oh yeah, that generosity piece, as we heard from Red Pine, it's the first and the last step of helping ourselves and helping others. And I also appreciated what you reminded us of, which is it's not about burning ourselves out. And I think that's an important lesson of this Diamond Sutra verse that we heard, no notion of a giver or a gift. That's not the piece I read, but that comes later, and it's a very famous line. We can't have that sort of harmonious, non-transactional, just flowing of energy if we're just giving from an empty place all the time. So I think those are 2 really important things to keep in mind. So thank you. And thank you everyone who shared an example. It's wonderful to hear from you. And I think that's maybe good enough for now. We can always talk more after the service in the lobby. So Gil, are you giving the announcements? Oh, it's not that. Okay. Do we do 4 great guys now or at the end? Now? Okay. All right, let's do the 4 great guys. Thank you. So these are the 4 great Bodhisattva vows. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate.
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
The great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning,
It's good to see you guys. We counted 53 pairs of shoes in the entrance hall, and I think that's a record for the year. So I think maybe we're going to need to install a balcony up there, a big pipe organ for chanting. I think that'd be nice. If you guys have any questions for us, you can ask any of us wearing the gray pajamas, and we will try to answer your questions. We encourage you to pick up a copy of our fall schedule, which looks like this, and I'll go through some highlights of the fall schedule in a moment. And also there's a sign-up sheet on the table in the lobby if you'd like to get on the list to receive our weekly email bulletin. So you can put your email address there, and we'll send you a bulletin about what's going on at the temple about once a week. Some things on the schedule. One is the introductory meditation course. And we recommend this because it's a good way to get your questions answered, ranging from very practical questions like, how can I meditate for 20 minutes without getting this cramp in the arch of my foot, down to questions about, like, what are some other practices of Zen besides meditation? So this is how I got started. We offer this introductory meditation course, and it runs for 5 consecutive Thursday evenings. So the next one is going to begin on October 12th, and it goes from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. So you may be interested in that. There's a sign-up sheet if you are interested. We also offer yoga classes. We're not having them right now, but those will start up again at the end of October. So October 31st on Tuesday evenings from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. And then we have a one-day retreat coming up Saturday, November 25th. And in the one-day retreat, we have periods of sitting meditation, walking meditation, work practice, vegetarian lunch. So that's a nice way to deepen your practice. And that'll run on Saturday, November 25th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's a sign-up sheet for that. For members that have been meditating for a while and want to do an intensive retreat, we have a 5-day retreat, Youngman Junction, coming up October 18th to 22nd. And let's see, we have Together Action today after the service. So we'll be doing about 15 minutes of work in the backyard, gardening, and also moving some shelving units from the backyard to the downstairs of this building. So meet in the backyard if you're interested in that for about 15 minutes. Recovery Dharma meeting today.
Recovery Dharma will be meeting next door in the Historic Temple at noon today.
Okay, so next door in the Historic Temple at noon. And then the temple's supported by your kind donations of time and money. There's a fishbowl right outside the store for monetary donations. And if you'd like to volunteer your time, the best way to do that is to come by on Saturday afternoons from 3 to 5 p.m. We go into the backyard and there's gardening practice and other work that needs to be done. We do it for 2 hours from 3 to 5 p.m. And in addition to cultivating your embodied practice, that's also a nice way to meet other members of the Sangha and get to know them. So we recommend that. And we have some herbal tea today on the table, so please join us for tea.
Thanks, Marla. Malum, are we leaving the cushions out? There's no yoga right now, correct? Okay.
No.
Just the front row. Okay. So in a moment, we're going to stand and conclude our service with 3 bows in front of the altar. And then I would ask your assistance in, as long as your mat is not in the front row, neatly putting it away in the back corner. So the round small cushions go on those red shelves, and the large mats go in that back corner where you can see that piece of wood. And one thing with the mats that's important is to stack them ideally facing all in the same direction. So the little flap that's in the front, all in the same direction, because then the stack will be very neat and it will not tip over when it gets tall. So.